Welcome to the City Business Festival on Air series here on Channel One Television and on 97.3 City FM. My name is Benneh. Today, we're answering the question, understanding real estate as an investment option. What are the issues? My guest has experience in real estate, infrastructure, mining, and technology. He's been working in those fields for many, many years. Benneh. When we come back, he would help us answer a few questions. Is a house an asset or a liability? What are the factors to consider if you want to invest in real estate? And how is the market behaving in these very interesting days for the Ghana city? All of that and more when we come back. Stay with us. Welcome back. So don't forget that the on-air series for the City Business Festival is brought to you by Absa Bank, MTN Ghana, and Zonda Technology. Yeah, thanks for joining us. These days, you are also the CEO of Merson Developers Limited. Tell me a bit about that before we jump into the issues.
Well, thank you for having me. We've always been involved in property, in real estate development and construction. Before, we had 3 separate companies doing construction, development, and property management. But we've now decided to consolidate all of them into one brand. So that's Merson Developers. And we develop properties across all the market segments. So we have a luxury development in Airport, Ultimate Gardens. We have a mid-market mixed-use property coming up in East Legon, 59 Lagos Avenue. And we have affordable housing coming up in OEB as well, Harvey Village.
The 3 things you mentioned suggest to me that the sector has various components. You mentioned construction, development, and property management. Where is the finance in all this?
Well, finance basically is the lifeblood of the sector, right? So both on the supply side and on the demand side.
Correct.
So on the supply side, if you're into construction or property development. So construction is just the civil engineering aspect of it. Development is broader. It looks at all the economics. Why do you want to put a house here? What market segment are you dealing with? Who is your customer? All of that. And both developers and contractors need financing to build what they build. But on the demand side, the customer, the tenant, the person renting the house also needs financing. And in Ghana, one of the areas in which our economy hasn't done very well is financing of demand for real estate, as in sensible financing, long-term.
So more money exists on the supply side to put it up, generally?
Even on the supply side, no, actually, because construction and real estate constitute only about 2.2% of bank assets.
Is it?
Right? Banks don't lend. There is a bit of lending to contractors who work on government projects, roads, that sort of thing. But most property developers in Ghana actually work with equity or customer advances. There's hardly any debt in the sector. So
that's a very interesting angle we'll pursue. But so the finance is affecting all 3. The construction, the development, and the... But before we even get into the whole market thing, let me start from the basics. Is a house an asset or a liability?
So this is a very interesting and long-running debate. So strictly speaking, an asset must be something you own that brings you money, it brings you an income, or it saves you money, right? So some people are of the opinion that if you build a house and you live in it, it's not an asset because it's not bringing you an income. All you're doing is spending money on it on maintenance and expenses and utility bills and that sort of thing. So you shouldn't really count it as an asset. My own position is that under all situations, a house is an asset.
Whether you own it, whether you live in it.
If you own
it.
If you're renting, it's not.
So if you own it, whether you're living in it Or
you're renting it out, you have a tenant in
it's
it.
still an asset.
It's still an asset, right? Because if you own it, it's a stock of capital. Assuming you've paid it off, right? You don't owe any money on it. It's a stock of capital. It's like savings for you, right? It's money sitting there. And any time that you're really hard up and you need cash, you can sell the house and you get some money. Maybe you use part of it to go and rent somewhere. And the rest of it, you do what you need to do with it. But so if you invest in it as an investment asset and you rent it out and you're earning rental income, then definitely that fits the classic definition of an asset. What we're also seeing increasingly is people investing in property, especially in prime areas, so that they can get loans from the banks. Because the banks, in Ghana, most of the banks only do collateralized lending. They say, give me a house, give me a landed property in a good area, and then I'll lend money to you against it. So they buy a house, hopefully they earn some rental income from it. The value of the house itself appreciates, so they get some capital gains on that side, though unrealized until they sell it. But the secondary or tertiary use of the house is that they can give it to a bank as collateral when they need a loan. So
that's an interesting thought. So not necessarily to rent it out, but to give you leverage or to give you some comfort with the banks.
Yeah.
But what if the house belongs to you and you're still paying for it by way of mortgage? Is it an asset or a liability?
So in the first place, in Ghana, and as in most places, you do not get 100% mortgage for a house. So if the house is worth 100 cedis, the bank will have a loan-to-value ratio of 70% or 80%. So they will say, of the 100 cedis, I'll give you a loan of 70 cedis or 80 cedis to buy it, but you need to put in cash of your own. The cash that you put in, that is an asset for you because it's value for you, right? And then when the value of the house goes up, so let's say you buy a house for 100 cedis. You pay 20 cedis of your own money. You owe 80 cedis on it, right? If the value of the house goes up to 120 cedis, that extra 20 cedis in appreciation, that's yours because your loan is still 80 cedis. So if let's say it goes up within 6 months, or maybe you bought a house off plan and then on completion, the value of the house goes up. It would mean that you put in 20 cedis, the bank gave you 80 cedis, you paid 100 cedis. Now the house is worth 120. That additional 20, you've earned 20 cedis extra on the 20 cedis that you invested. And that's 100% return.
But does it not depend on whether you are done paying the 80? So I understand that the value of the house may have gone to 120, but you're servicing the loan for the 80. Even though it's 120, is it realizable?
No, not necessarily. Okay, so if you default on your loan and the bank forecloses and sells, so long as there is a measure called forced sale value, when you're selling it as a distressed property, how can you sell it for? You can't sell it at the market value, it's usually less. So in this case, just for argument purposes, let's say you bought a house at 100, forced sale value is 90 cedis. The bank gave you a loan of 80 cedis or 70 cedis to buy it. If the bank sells the house at the forced sale value, they take the rest of their money from it. There's still a balance that belongs to you. So for me, there are very few circumstances in which you cannot consider a house to be an asset.
Wonderful. This is still the honor series for the City Business Festival. My guest, Benneh Amponsa, who's taking us through the basics of real estate. As part of our on-air series, week 1, we're looking at finance and personal financial planning. Let's go again to asset classes, because one of my previous speakers gave us something on investment. So basically, we know that you can invest in stocks or bonds, you can invest in currency, you can invest in equity, but you also mentioned real estate. So is that an exhaustive list? And if it is, what are the features of real estate that makes it different from the other 3?
No, it is by no means an exhaustive list. list of asset classes
Yeah,
is long and growing every day,
correct.
right? It's as long as human innovation. Okay. So you have equities, you have fixed income, which is bonds, and all that. You have real estate, you have currency, there's intellectual property, and even in equities, there's listed equities, which is what you refer to on the stock exchange.
Yes.
But there's also unlisted equities, private equity. So if you own a stake in a small business somewhere, that's an asset class that's quite different from listed equities.
Correct.
There's cryptocurrency, right? There's intellectual property. So there are lots of things. What makes real estate unique is that relative to a lot of asset classes, it is illiquid. You own a house, you want to sell it, it's not a one-day matter. It could take months, right? So the illiquidity makes it a little unique. And because of that, when you're financing real estate, it's important to finance it with long-term money. It's not money that you just want to turn around. I have this thing for today, tomorrow, let me just... No, you don't. You invest in real estate with money that you have for the long term, because when you need the money back, getting it back is not going to be very quick. Real estate also involves a lot of documentation, and that makes it expensive. So you need to make sure the title is good, and when you buy, you need to transfer the title into your own name. You probably need a lawyer for that process, all of that. So it involves more documentation than most asset classes, right? Also, what makes real estate unique is that it's one of the few assets that you can actually use. Okay, so except maybe the expensive jewelry or something, real estate is, if you own it, you can live in it. Right? So
Whilst you still own it.
While you still own it.
Yes.
So you have the utility that you derive from it as a home, right? And then there's the commercial and economic attributes of it. And when you think of it separately, you begin to appreciate it more deeply, right? Real estate is also very highly regulated. Okay, when you think of fixed income, when you're buying it, or when you're writing a private loan, you probably don't need a regulator to approve it. In Ghana, it's not always the case, but in theory, you can't build a house without a building permit, right? You need an architect, you need engineers, and all of whom are regulated because it needs to be safe, right? So real estate is one of the areas that's the most highly regulated in. And also, there are many aspects of real estate investment that's not exactly under your control. So, for instance, location. Location is one of the key attributes of real estate investing. And you can see land somewhere or property somewhere, you buy it, next moment, your neighbor also buys it and comes to build shops or something, which impacts your value. And maybe the area is zoned for mixed use. So you can't complain, right? Because
and that affects the value.
It affects the value.
You can live in an estate,
right?
Somebody wants to build something else, and then people don't want to live there anymore.
Yeah.
We'll come back and discuss more of that.
Yeah.
This is still the on-air series for the City Business Festival 2025. And today, we're talking about real estate as an investment or asset class. We're discussing that with Benneh and Ponsa. We'll take a short break. When we come back, he'll clarify a few points we make. And then we'll also talk about how do you get onto the property ladder if real estate is what you're interested in. And you also help us scan the market. What's available? How do we make it more accessible for more people as an investment option? Stay with us. Welcome back. This is the on-air series for the City Business Festival on ChannelOne Television and on 97.3 City FM. And this first week is focused on personal finance. We're ending this week with looking at real estate. My guest, Benneh Mponsa, who is a man with interest and knowledge and experience in real estate, construction, infrastructure, mining, generally a finance person. Thanks for staying with us. So you were giving me the distinct features of real estate, and you were leading on to a particular point that it's not within your control, but you can live in it, so it has its good size, it's more long-term. But I think you were leading up to something with that description.
So probably the most important feature of real estate as an asset class is that it derives its value from people being present. Ooh. So, for instance, during COVID, when people couldn't travel, right, because of reduced tourism and lockdown, people can move around, all of that, it seriously impacted the value of real estate. Sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. Positively in the sense that value of residential real estate went up because people started spending more time at home and started caring about where they live. Value of office properties went down because we're all working from home. And it's been a long, lingering effect because even now, most companies are doing hybrid. So office spaces are struggling. But also, what happened, especially with COVID and after, is that people feel they have to live. So hospitality, restaurants, and places of entertainment are seeing greater patronage. And if you're a real estate investor, let's say you put some money into real estate before COVID, how could you foresee this? So there's a certain risk to it that is almost entirely outside the control of the investor.
I was discussing with somebody earlier this week who was saying to me that generally, when people feel confident in the economy, they invest more long-term. So he was talking about the shape of the yield curve, but basically saying that when people are opting for shorter-term instruments, it's a sign that they are not very sure. So, for example, if the T-bill uptake is so high for the 180-day, for the 90-day, as against, say, the 365, it suggests that people are doing a wait and see. To the extent that real estate is more long-term, can we use the uptake of real estate as an indicator of confidence in an economy?
So again, as with a lot of my answers, it's yes and no. It's yes, because demand for real estate is one of the indicators of confidence in an economy.
Yeah.
Because the demand doesn't only derive from the local people, the natives. If an economy is doing well, you get more people coming into the economy, that jurisdiction, to do business. And also for tourism and other social purposes, not just economic. And so because the demand for real estate is derived from people needing it, then it can indicate that there is a greater confidence in the long-term prospects of the economy. But the no is also because when the population is growing, and in Ghana, for instance, we are seeing rapid urbanization, especially in Accra and its environs. Within a period of 5 years, I think 6 years, Ghana has gone from being about 55% urbanized to 61% urbanized, right? So in Ghana now, we have more urban areas than, and then our population is also growing. We have a rising middle class, right? And all of that. So all of these create demand for real estate and certain types of real estate, because there are subcategories within the broad category of real estate. So just by the population growing, and because fortunately for us, we don't have any civil insurrections or anything to worry about, some of the demand is just the natural consequence of a growing population, and a population that's also slowly not as fast as they should, but slowly becoming wealthier.
Still with that point, we are discussing real estate as an asset class, but most people see a home as a security to start off with. So there are two dimensions. We can discuss how people can get on the property ladder, whether to buy or to build. And then for those who have more money, whether to opt for real estate as an asset class. So let's deal with the first part. Most people would want to have a house. You build for people, and you've tried to do the various stages. I noticed that for is it Mason, you have even houses which are a bit above 50K USD, which is pretty reasonable. But even that, I'm told it's not easy for the average worker to get a mortgage. So what does your experience tell us about how people can get on the property ladder, generally, before we get into what we should do to open that space up?
So traditionally, how people have got onto the property ladder has been to save money until they can just go out and build or buy, or they start building small. And in Ghana, generally it takes about 10 years for a family to build their home, right? Which is way too long. But that's the traditional path to property ownership. What we are beginning to see now is there is an increase in the availability of mortgages, almost entirely down to a very commendable initiative from Petra Trust, Petra Pensions. With their leadership and, of course, the support of others, now, if you have pension tier 2, tier 3, you are allowed to leverage your tier 2 and tier 3 to pay a deposit on a home tax-free.
Wow.
Right? Before, you couldn't touch your tier 2 at all. Your tier 3, you needed to save for about 10 years, otherwise you paid tax on it. But now, you can leverage that to pay the deposit on a home, tax-free.
Wow.
So if the average tax rate is like 20%, then in theory, it means that the taxman is actually paying 20% of the bill for you, subsidizing, right? And what Petra has also done is to come to an arrangement with some partner banks to grant mortgages to their scheme members at a reduced rate. So even though the market rate for mortgages is, I think, just about 30% now.
And this is local currency mortgage.
Local currency. The members of the Petra scheme are getting mortgages at around 20%, a full 10 percentage points lower than the market rate. Right?
Wow.
Because it's a benefit to, why just keep your money and not help you to get better additional benefit from
an unintended consequence of the new pension law is that it can even open up more people to get their own homes.
That's really what it should do. That's what it should do, because if you're talking about an asset that's long-term in nature, and you're talking about a pool of capital that's also long-term in nature, it's a perfect fit, isn't it? And I know that there's been a lot of discussion in the pensions and life insurance sectors generally around this. So hopefully there'll be even more capital available to them. However, the issue of construction finance, because the mortgage must be written on a house. And with mortgages, you say, okay, pay 15 or 20%, and then the developer develops the house, and then you pay the balance. The developer doesn't have financing.
So one of the ways of making the price of homes come down is to increase the financing of construction. Certainly.
That's perfect. I think that we missed a trick in affordable housing schemes in the past. Always saying, oh, let's drive down the price. But look, if you build and deliver houses for $20,000, $25,000 or whatever, in a sense, you're creating a slum. It's not only about the price. It's also about the payment arrangements. Because if you're saying to the buyer, right, that don't pay me $40,000 today, only pay 20% and spread the rest over 10 years. pay in installments over 10 years or 15 years or more, even better 20 years, right? Suddenly, that person only has to worry about paying maybe the CD equivalent of 100. So let's say 1,000 CDs a month, right? In order to own a home. Because the financing arrangement behind it allows the developer to offer such an arrangement to the buyer. That is what would actually make property affordable, not necessarily going to build something and selling for $15,000 because you want a certain relationship of income. So
now that we are in an era where the local currency is appreciating, if it's a long-term appreciation, will that make it easier for construction finance, or it's going to make things worse? I'm asking because I know that a lot of the construction people need to import their inputs. So if it's cheaper for them to bring those inputs in, the cost of the house may come down. So the macroeconomy becomes the basis, correct?
That is true. You're perfectly right. What would help even more is if we have a value chain that's localized.
Correct.
So I don't need to import tiles. I don't need to import
louver blades, window panels,
or whatever.
Yeah.
But the reason why importers import is because the capacity for local producers is small. So, and when you are a developer, you're chasing yield. So your work is sensitive to time. So when you go to a local producer and the local producer says, oh, I don't have it today, come tomorrow or come next week, then there's no certainty around your own work plan, and it affects your work plan and your. So, yes, the currency appreciation into the long term, if it's a predictable pattern, is good. But if we could localize the value chain,
that is a more long-term.
Yes,
wonderful.
That's a more sustainable. That will have a more sustainable effect on the price of homes, and everything would be in local currency as well.
One thing that baffles me about our housing market is the fact that, as you rightly said, a lot of people say they want affordable housing they can't get. So that a mismatch between demand and supply overall. But for sectors, so for example, in the high end, there's a lot of property that's empty. Yet there are people in the middle class who are moving to the upper class who are still looking for a house they can buy in certain ranges. Is quite tough. So I notice that developers are trying to come down a bit, like your developers. What's the missing link? Is it that there's external money that's funding only the very high ends? Let me give you an example. So you go to cantonments, you go to Tesano, you go to Ridge. There are apartments coming up, but upwards of $300,000, $500,000. People may have between 150 to 200K. Even if you go to East Legon, you will get 300, 350, right? If you want to go below 200, you have to move towards Adenta, Achimota. What's the problem? Why is demand and supply not sinking?
The biggest problem with delivering at the low end of the market is infrastructure, right? Good. If I buy 1 acre in cantonments or airport, and I put apartments on it, most probably I don't need to worry about the road around it. I don't need to worry about availability of bulk utilities, so water, electricity, all of that. I only focus on the concept that I'm building and delivering to the market. Does it make sense? And that's it. If I deliver the low end, right, it's like any
everything
low
else, you have
price,
to pay for it.
You have to pay for everything. But also, in order to make money at the low end, you need volume, right? You can't go and, if I build 5 houses in airport, I'll probably make money. If I build 5 houses in OEB and sell the low end, in nominal terms,
probably need 200 houses in OEB.
And when you are building 200 houses, the proper way to think about it is not just 200 houses, it's a small town development. Okay.
Roads, other things must be
Roads
there,
and all of
gutters.
that.
So it's actually high up than the cost per unit.
Yes, and you need social amenities. You need a shopping area. You probably need a small clinic. All of that, right? You need to think. So it's a small town development that you're doing.
Wow.
One of the reasons why the government's affordable housing projects have failed,
yes,
is because they've never thought of it that way. Because if you take, let's say, Saglemi, what are you building for? Is it the nurse who works in Kolebu? So how do they make a living? You need to think beyond
on that
the
question,
house.
we will end. We can't answer all the questions, but I think you've helped us think through this in a very important way. So thank you, Yao. Look, we've been talking to Yao Benneh Ponsa, who is with Mason Properties, and our topic has been real estate as an asset class, understanding it. But this is just the fourth in the series for the first week, and we hope you've learned something this week. Don't forget the on-air series for the Business Festival on CT and Channel One, brought to you by Absa Bank, MTN, and Zonda Technologies. My name is Benneh. We'll see you next week. Stay with us.